What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you another build for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. This time we are using the Ranger class for my Demon Slayer build. Now, more specifically, we are using the Demon Slayer archetype. And yeah, listen, all the names for these builds can't be amazing. The archetype summed it up perfectly, so here we are. Now, the crux of the Demon Slayer archetype is that you basically lose your choice for a favorite enemy in exchange for being able to hit demons very, very well. So rather than choose a favorite enemy like Rangers normally get to do, they instead get to hit all three demon subtypes, demons of slaughter, magic, and strength, as their favorite enemy. Now, normally, that's a bit of a trade-off. However, in a game where like 80% of what you're fighting is demons, it's actually a pretty incredible archetype. Combine that with the instant enemy spell that we'll get later, and we can actually apply favorite enemy to other targets that are not demons, and we've pretty much overcome the negative of not being able to choose our favorite enemy. But again, most of what we're fighting is demons anyway. In addition to those things, the Demon Slayer also gets Fiendish Quarry in addition to their regular Quarry, and we'll talk a bit about that later. But essentially what we're trying to do with our Ranger here is use all of these bonuses to killing demons, the fact that we get an animal companion, etc., to basically become a demon's worst nightmare. So first up, let's start with character creation and what that should look like for you. Obviously, we are going to pick the Demon Slayer Ranger. Now, for your race, you've got some options here, honestly. So human is always a fantastic choice simply because they get an extra feat at character creation plus a +2 to an ability score of their choice. However, for this particular build, I thought it would be the most fun if we went Tiefling. That said, basically anything that can give you a bonus to dexterity or wisdom is really going to do it for you, as Rangers do need wisdom for a few things, and then dexterity is of course the main stat we're going to be using as a ranged character. However, if you wanted to go with a melee ranger, you could go strength instead. That would also be a way to do this. But for this build, we're using a bow, so dex and wisdom. Though we will talk a little bit more about strength here in a bit. Now, as a result, human's great for this, like it is for basically everything because of that extra feat choice. But again, personally, we're going Tiefling. Now, when it comes to your Tiefling heritage, I would recommend the Fault Spawn or the Asura Spawn. This is because we're going to get a +2 bonus to dexterity and wisdom, a -2 penalty to intelligence, which is a stat we're not using, as well as a +2 bonus to knowledge arcana and knowledge world, which you can take or leave, but we also get a +2 saving throw against enchantment spells and effects, which is nice, and you can cast Hideous Laughter as well. Now, for our background, we are going Hunter. This is primarily because it will give us a weapon proficiency bonus with short bows and long bows, which we'll be using, so it actually just becomes an enhancement bonus. And then from there, we talk ability points. Now, we can completely dump Charisma. We are not using it for anything. I would not take Intelligence any lower than it already is, because that will affect your skill points. But from there, we want to take Dexterity all the way to 20, capitalizing on our dumped Charisma. Then we can take Wisdom to 18, and I personally like to take Constitution to 12 just because. However, there is a case to be made for putting that into Strength instead, which again we'll talk about here in a little bit. But Constitution or Strength to 12. Now, from there, we talk skills. Now, we are going to get the biggest bonuses to Stealth, Perception, and Allure Nature. I will say, if you do not use Stealth very often, don't waste your point and instead put it in Knowledge World or Knowledge Arcana. Personally, I like to go Knowledge World because I think that's a little more roleplay-y. But just remember, if you're not going to use Stealth, then don't actually put points into it because you're just wasting them. And Knowledge World would be a lesser bonus overall, but would be more useful, frankly. And then from there, we pick our level 1 feat. We're going to pick Point Blank Shot because we are going with a ranged character. Now, whether or not you use Point Blank Shot kind of varies, but if you are within 30 feet of an enemy, you'll get a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls, just period, which is pretty helpful. But more importantly, this is a prerequisite to Precise Shot, as well as some other things that we'll be using. So from there, let's talk leveling up. Now, in addition to our regular feats as we level, Rangers pick a combat style at level 2. In this case, we'll be going archery. They also get to start picking favorite terrain at level 3. So they've got quite a bit going on. Now, at level 2, we're actually going to be able to pick our archery combat style, but this will also allow us to pick up a bonus feat, and we are going to pick up Precise Shot. This is going to eliminate the penalty that you normally take when you attack enemies that are engaged in melee combat. and is pretty much mandatory for any ranged character. Now at level 3, we're going to pick up Blind Fight. This is primarily because it will make us immune to gaze attacks. In addition to this, if we are hit by an invisible attacker, they get no advantages to hitting us in melee, meaning that we don't lose our dexterity bonus to our AC. This actually does come up a lot, and by itself is pretty good, but the main reason we're taking this is the immunity to gaze attacks, which a lot of higher level enemies will use constantly. Blind Fight is actually a pretty important ability because of that. Now, at level 3, we're going to be able to pick up a Favored Terrain. For your first favored terrain, I would recommend Urban. This is because in Act 1, you are primarily fighting in an urban environment. All of the environments and the maps are tagged as urban, so you're going to want to grab this. This will give you a bonus to your initiative checks and your skill checks while you are in that terrain, which is just very helpful. Now at level 4, we're going to be able to pick an animal companion. Personally, I love the classics. I love a Smilodon, as their pounce ability is ridiculous, which means they can charge and also make a full attack, which is very, very useful. However, I will say there's a case to be made for either a wolf or a dog because they are very easily given a trip build, as they get a trip attack as part of their regular attacks, meaning that they can perform a trip combat maneuver just by attacking, and if you build an animal companion for that, that can be very, very strong. But basically, my recommendations for animal companion are either wolf, Smilodon, or dog. Wolf and dog are, again, trip build all the way. Smilodons get a crazy amount of attacks, as well as the pounce ability, like I mentioned. And if you take, I believe it's the bully archetype for animal companions, you can give your Smilodon a trip combat maneuver, but it won't be part of their regular attacks. And then at level 5, we're going to want to pick up Boon Companion. This is because, as a ranger, our companion is actually slightly lower level than us when we first get it, and Boon Companion will raise your animal companion's level to match yours, which makes them much more effective simply because they'll actually be able to hit things. Then at level 6, we get another combat style bonus feat. I would recommend Point Blank Master. Point Blank Master will allow us to use a ranged weapon while we are threatened without provoking an attack of opportunity, which means basically if there's an enemy right next to us and we shoot them with our bow or someone else with our bow, we're not going to take any attacks of opportunity as a result, which as you can imagine is useful in a lot of situations. Now our level 7 feat, I would recommend Clustered Shots. This means that all of our damage is totaled up from all of our attacks before the opponent gets to apply damage reduction to them. Normally, every attack rolls the damage reduction separately. However, in this instance, all of our attacks go through and then the damage reduction is applied as compared to each individual hit, which makes damage reduction much less useful for the enemy. Now at level 8, you'll actually get another favored terrain choice, but it's kind of dealer's choice for that one. And then at level 9, I would recommend picking up Rapid Shot for your feat. When you make a full attack with a ranged weapon, you can fire one additional time at your highest base attack bonus. However, all of your attacks take a -2 attack penalty. However, this is largely offset by our favored enemy, plus you can get a mythic feat that reduces that penalty to 0. Then for our combat style feat at level 10, I like to pick up Mini Shot. When we make a full attack, our first attack will actually fire 2 arrows, and if that attack hits, both arrows hit, which means we hit the enemy twice. However, sneak attack damage only goes through once. However, damage bonuses, such as a strength bonus from a composite bow, which again we'll talk about here in a bit, will apply twice. Our favored enemy damage bonus will apply twice, which makes it incredibly strong. Now, starting at 11 is when we start getting Quarry. Now, the Fiendish Quarry at level 11 is not super useful. Instead of taking the +2 attack bonus from regular Quarry, we can treat our weapons as good aligned. However, there's so many ways to get good aligned weapons that Fiendish Quarry by itself really isn't that great, and I would rather have the +2 attack bonus, which we get from regular Quarry. And basically, as a standard action, we can denote a target as our quarry, which gives us a +2 bonus on attack rolls. And if we make a critical threat, which is to say we roll a 20, the critical is automatically confirmed without requiring another roll. However, we can only have one quarry at a time. Generally speaking, you always want a quarry, especially if you're fighting one thing like a big boss enemy. You want to target that as a quarry, which is pretty helpful. But for our level 11 feat, we want to take Hammer the Gap. Whenever we make a full attack, each consecutive hit against that opponent will deal extra damage equal to the number of previous consecutive hits that you've made. and that damage is multiplied on a critical hit. This feat is actually incredible, especially late game. You're going to be getting a significant amount of extra damage from this because you'll have 7 or 8 attacks, potentially even more. So that consecutive damage really adds up. Plus, if you crit, you'll deal insane damage because this will multiply that extra damage as well. Then at level 13, we pick up Improved Precise Shot. Our ranged attacks will ignore anything but total concealment and cover. This will help you bypass things like blur or mirror image, which makes it pretty awesome. And then at level 14, we pick up Improved Critical. This will double our threat range. The threat range for most bows is 20, so this will allow us to critical on a 19. Then at level 15, I like to pick up Critical Focus. This will give us a +4 circumstance bonus on our confirmation critical rolls. And then at 17, I like to pick up Blinding Critical, which causes us to blind the target when we critically hit if they fail a Fortitude save. However, even if they make their Fortitude save, they still get dazzled for a few rounds. And the DC of that Fortitude save is 10 plus your base attack bonus, which at level 20 would be 30. Now for our level 18 combat style feat, you're kind of running out of options. I like to pick Toughness here, but that's just me. And then for our last feat at level 19, I like to pick up Snapshot. This will allow us to make attacks of opportunity with our ranged weapon. However, as a ranged character, there's not exactly a lot of enemies walking directly by you, so it doesn't come up a lot, and I like to save it for last. Though honestly, the last combat style feat and your level 19 feat, you could do whatever you wanted with. Really, it wouldn't make a significant difference. But now we need to talk about Improved Fiendish Quarry and Improved Quarry. So at 19th level, we get Improved Fiendish and Regular Quarry. So Improved Fiendish will allow us to forego our attack bonus and instead give ourselves the Holy Weapon special ability. This can actually be very good. However, this is still a standard action, as opposed to Improved Regular Quarry, which in addition to giving us a +4 bonus to our attack rolls, is actually also a free action as compared to a standard action like Regular Quarry. So there's a bit of interplay here between using Fiendish or regular Improved Quarry, as Improved Quarry can be used as a free action, whereas Improved Fiendish Quarry cannot. And then at level 20, you'll also get Master Hunter, which is a potential instant kill. However, you're not going to be able to use it very much. Demons have very high fortitude saves, generally speaking, and your DC is not really ever going to be high enough to make use of that ability, but you do get it at level 20. And I would recommend taking this class all the way to level 20 because in order to make the most out of your Demon Slayer bonuses, you get the last incremental version of that at level 20. And then the last thing on this is that at level 13, you get another favored terrain pick, and I would recommend Abyss, as you will spend most of the act at which you are that level in the Abyss. So favored terrain Abyss is pretty useful there. Now let's talk a little bit about spells. So Rangers get a limited selection of spells. They will get level 4 divine spells, and their caster level will only ever go up to level 17. Now for level 1 spells, I would recommend Hurricane Bow. This is basically just a flat damage boost. This will make your regular longbow, instead of dealing 1d8, deal 2d6 damage. It's just a useful buff that you can use before combat to give yourself some extra damage per hit, which combined with things like Hammer the Gap, Mini Shot, etc. actually will deal a substantial amount of damage as long as you keep this buff active. And then for level 2, I would recommend Sense Vitals. This will give you sneak attack damage. That slowly increases a bit as you level up and can overall be pretty useful. You do get some decent buffs at spell level 2 as well, so you can use those if you want. But personally, I would say Sense Vitals or Barkskin. And then at level 3, you want Instant Enemy. As a swift action, you will be able to designate a target as your favorite enemy for its duration, which means you can apply your favorite enemy bonus to an enemy that is not your favorite enemy. So you'll get this fairly later in the game, but it can be very helpful when you're attacking things that just happen to not be demons, which does occasionally come up, but most of what we're killing is demons. And then at level 4, there's 2 I would recommend. Animal Growth. This will give a ridiculous bonus to your animal companion, especially if they're strength-based, but regardless of whether or not they are, it's going to be useful for them. They're going to deal extra damage with Animal Growth. Very good buff. And then Aspect of the Wolf. This will give you a +4 enhancement bonus to strength and dexterity. It also gives you bonuses to trip attacks, but we're not really going to be using it for that. The +4 bonus to strength and dexterity can be pretty good, but keep in mind this is an enhancement bonus and it's not going to stack with enhancement bonuses to these attributes from your armor, such as a belt that's doing the same thing. So if you have something that will not stack with Aspect of the Wolf, you might want to stick with Animal Growth, as that's not really an issue as much. And if for some reason you don't find any of those useful, then my next suggestion would be Freedom of Movement, as that is just handy in general. Now, next up, let's talk equipment a little bit. So, when it comes to bows and things, we're actually a bit spoiled for choice in this regard. There are a lot of really good bows throughout the game. However, I would recommend a couple things in particular over others. Now, most of our gear is just going to be the best stuff you can find. You know, anything that buffs wisdom, anything that buffs dexterity, obviously pretty good for you. However, you might want to consider things that buff your strength. And why is this? Well, that is because most of the bows in the game are actually composite bows, and the composite longbow type, or composite short bow or whatever, will actually allow you to add your strength modifier to the damage. So in this way, while it's not a critical stat and you don't necessarily need to, if you buff your strength and you're using a composite bow, you can actually, through enhancement buffs, etc., give yourself a considerable amount more damage. So something to keep in mind, but it's not make or break for the build by any means, but any type of bow that has that composite tag will actually add your strength bonus to the damage. Now, another item you're going to want to pick up in Act 2 actually is the big game gloves. You can find these at the Lost Chapel by defeating an optional boss named Mogla. Now, the big game gloves are great, but you're not going to be able to use them for a while because you don't get Quarry until level 11, which is like mid-Act 3, and you'll get these gloves in Act 2. But basically, whenever you announce a quarry, that enemy will also suffer a -2 penalty to AC and become sickened, which is pretty useful. And another really useful item you can get right in Act 1 at the Tower of Estrad is the Lady Calandra's chain shirt. This will give you a really good AC actually, 6 base AC and then a 6 dexterity AC bonus, which should pretty much be what you have at that time, which will allow you to make full use of your dexterity and the actual armor, which for a ranger is pretty handy. Again, Tower of Estrad, Act 1, and then the Wicked Longbow actually is in Market Square. You find that in one of the houses there. Now, let's talk Mythic Path. So, for Mythic Path, I would recommend Azada. I think Azada works perfectly with this. You get Aivu, which is essentially a second animal companion, which can be incredibly strong, combined with the fact that you already have one. I will say, though, that the Azada did get a bit of a nerf recently in patch 1.2. They kind of reined in some of their more ridiculous abilities, like Aivu's caster level goes to 20 instead of 30 now. But I was messing around with this, and even post-nerf, it's still a very strong way to go. But regardless of what Mythic Path you actually choose, which we'll double back to, when it comes to your Mythic abilities, ranged characters actually get quite a few really good abilities. I would recommend Cleaving Shot as your first pick. Every time you deal a crit or you actually reduce a target to 0 hit points, you'll deal weapon damage to every enemy in a 10-foot radius, which is honestly a very useful ability. You can also pick up Distracting Shots, which will let you apply a penalty to AC against melee attacks to the enemy that you hit. There's also Expose Vulnerability, where every third hit with a ranged weapon will deal an additional 1d6 per 2 mythic ranks of divine damage. There's the Bigger They Are, which will give you a bonus on your attack rolls with ranged weapons equal to the penalty to AC a target receives from being whatever size they are, which is very useful against larger enemies. So you got a few choices. You might also consider Mythical Beast. This will make your animal companions even stronger. So you got a few options there. When it comes to Mythic Feats, you basically want to pick the feats that you already have, but now the Mythic version. So Rapid Shot Mythic, for instance, will remove the -2 penalty to your attack roll, which means Rapid Shot is insanely useful, as that is essentially just a free attack now. But when it comes to actually being Azada, they get a bunch of great buffs and extra spells that you can use. They get songs that will buff your party as well as you, making it very hard to kill you, and also just making your allies that much stronger. They also get superpowers, however, which are incredibly strong Azada-specific abilities, and there are 2 in particular I would recommend, and that is Life Bonding Friendship. This will give you teamwork feats to share with your entire party, which if you use the right ones is very strong in and of itself, but this will actually also keep your companions from dying for a little while. However, I wouldn't bank on that part of it. I would mostly worry about this for the teamwork feats, as we are not a character that is using a lot of charisma. And while we can still use that part of it, you got to be careful because you can absolutely die if you get all your companions killed with that. And then the other one I would recommend is Supersonic Speed. This will give your character the permanent effect of haste spell, in combat that is. It will also cause all melee and ranged weapon attacks to have a 20% miss chance, all target spells aimed at you to have a 10% miss chance, all the damage from area attacks against you is halved, even if you make your saving throw, which can bring the damage all the way down to a quarter. However, one important note is that the miss chance does not stack with concealment, so if you have something like blur on, it's one or the other, it doesn't stack them. There are a few others. I would just recommend those two. You're going to be able to pick 4 of them in total, so leave it open there a little bit, but those are the 2 that I like the most. Now, when it comes to Mythic Path, if you want some other options, really there's no wrong choice. You could make any Mythic Path work with this, but the one I would recommend the most is Azada. I think that's what you're going to get the most out of with this particular class, especially since it kind of leans into the Demon Slayer vibe of it. But keep in mind, if you want to go the Azada route, it's really best if you are a chaotic good character, or at the very least just chaotic in general. But being chaotic good will make your life a bit easier. And from there, let's talk combat a bit. Now, when it comes to actually using this character, one of the nice things about this build is that they are a very simple class to play. Really, all you've got to do is make sure that your buffs are active, Hurricane Bow and Sense Vitals. If you're, again, using Azada, you might want to make sure that you have any songs that you're trying to use are also active, or any spells that you're getting from being an Azada that also give you buffs, you want to make sure those are active. So basically buff up before combat. Once you get quarry and stuff later on in the game, you might want to make sure you're actually applying quarry so you get the benefits from that. But beyond that, it's basically point and click. You just point your bow at things and you're going to destroy stuff. At level 9 or 10, you're going to be dealing like 100 to 150 damage just on regular hits to demons, which brings me to my next point. Obviously target the demons with this class. If you're fighting a mix of demons and something else, focus on the demons with this character because that's where they're getting their bonuses. Later on, when you get the instant enemy spell, which can be cast as a swift action, you can kind of overcome that a little bit and attack everything. But until you get that a little later in the game, you're definitely going to want to focus on demons. But again, demons are most of what you're fighting. But again, just remember, if it's down to a choice between a demon and something else, attack the demon. Now, while your individual character can deal with regular attacks at level 10 between 100 and 150, if you crit, you're going to deal probably a couple hundred damage that round, at least to a demon anyways. And moreover, that doesn't include Ivu and your animal companion because they get to take their turn separately and they are likely to deal some damage as well. Ivu, even post-nerf, is still pretty effective. She gets a really big breath weapon that does 2d10 damage the second you get her. And then if you build your animal companion correctly, they can also be very strong, kind of regardless of how you choose to do it. At the end of the day, it's free attacks on the enemy. So with you and your animal companions and Ivu accounted for, this individual character at level like 10, once you actually pick your Mythic Path, will already be doing probably 200 damage a round, give or take, provided they actually hit every time, which if they're attacking demons, they are very likely to. Because on core difficulty, the bonuses to your attack with the Demon Slayer is such that it's rare that you miss when you're attacking a demon because the bonuses are just very substantial. In a lot of cases, unless you roll a nat 1, you're gonna hit. Late game, this gets even more ridiculous as you get more attacks and higher damage, plus better equipment to buff up your attributes to give you more damage, as well as just finding better equipment in general. And ultimately, this class will give you a very high damage, very easy to play class, and in fact, this particular class does really well early game as well because they start getting their bonuses to fighting demons very quickly, and even in the early game, you're fighting a lot of demons. Though, to be fair, in Act 1, they are mixed in with quite a few humans, so again, remember, attack demons most of the time. At least until you get instant enemy. Overall, the build is high damage, easy to play, and it specializes in killing demons. So what more could you ask for in the Wrath of the Righteous adventure path? And with all of that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, commenting, subscribing, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.